Thursday is about skepticism. And I want to introduce a puzzle about skepticism. So, you all probably think that science gives us knowledge, or at least many people think that science gives us knowledge. It seems plausible that science gives us knowledge, right? So, if Newtonian physics is able to predict where a ball is going to land super accurately, basically every single time that we throw the ball, it seems like science has given us some knowledge about the world. So it's revealed something true about the world. Whatever Newtonian physics assumes, that stuff, those assumptions are probably true, because it gets it right every time. Like, artillery shells, we aim them with the guidance of assumptions, largely the assumptions of Newtonian physics. Okay, but then there's this idea that science is skeptical, right? So does anyone know who this guy is on the screen? He was Bill Nye before Bill Nye was a thing. So in the many decades ago, like 80s maybe even earlier than that, there was like this famous series of documentaries called Cosmos, and he was the guy who was narrating most of it. His name's Carl Sagan. So this is a quote from Carl Sagan. "Skeptical scrutiny is the means by which deep thoughts can be winnowed from deep nonsense." Whatever that means. "If you're only skeptical, then no new ideas make it through to you." Now, Carl Sagan is a big fan of science, and here he seems to be somewhat of a fan of skepticism. He's saying skeptical scrutiny is, and then he says something that's probably supposed to suggest that skeptical scrutiny is good. But then he says, if you're only skeptical, then something that's probably bad. So yay, skepticism, sort of. And this is coming from someone who likes science. So this is probably someone who does think that science gives us knowledge, but who probably thinks that science is also skeptical. But how can skepticism give us knowledge? Seems like a strange thing to say. Isn't skepticism the idea that we don't have knowledge? Okay, so this is a puzzle, and there's probably a variety of ways to answer the puzzle, but one way you might think is, look, I think we might mean different things by skepticism in here. So yeah, there is the sense of skepticism, which is, we don't know anything. Then there's this other sense of skepticism, which is not like, no, look, we don't know. It's not that we don't know anything. It's just that we shouldn't, unreflectively accept something without, some amount of evidence. And then we have to decide how much evidence is enough. And if you equivocate, you might remember the fallacy of equivocation. If you equivocate those two things, yeah, this seems like a puzzle. You can't say both that we don't know anything and that science gives us knowledge. But that would be a contradiction. So let's try to figure out what skepticism, what we're going to mean by skepticism. So in one sense, there is skepticism about everything, and that would be the idea we can't know anything. Seems pretty straightforward. But then there can be specific forms of skepticism, right? Skepticism about blank says we can't know anything about blank. So this distinction matters because probably none of us are skeptics about everything. But each of us might be skeptical about something. So even though none of us are skeptics about everything, we still might be fans of skepticism sometimes or in some ways about some things. Cool? Okay, so bring it back to science. I was just talking about how Newtonian physics gets it right almost every single time when it comes to lots of stuff. right? So if I give you the like velocity and mass and I don't know angle at which a baseball is launched into the air, using Newtonian physics, you can basically predict like the arc of that it will travel and like where it will land with great precision every single time. So it's true, right? Newtonian physics probably true, is what we thought. And then Einstein comes along and, you know, does some science or does some math or does whatever Einstein did besides, you know, whatever he did in his patent office. And he realizes actually that's not quite right. Some of Newtonian physics or its assumptions are false. And it's a good thing he did that. So when we were trying to get to the moon, we were trying to use Newtonian physics to like figure out, you know, at what angle we need to leave the atmosphere in order to like orbit around the Earth and then therefore get launched to the moon. And without Einstein's adjustment to our understanding of physics, that would have gone badly. This also helps us with like satellite technology, right? So we have to incorporate parts of what Einstein has told us about physics in order for our satellites to work correctly. And, you know, so our GPS on our phone works correctly. Okay, so what's this got to do with skepticism? Again, this question of if science is skeptical, how is it supposed to yield knowledge? So the idea is we thought Newtonian physics was true, and then it turned out to be false in some very important ways, as Einstein showed. So should we just think that our current program, whatever we currently think the world, the way we think the world is according to physics, should we just think that's true? Or should we reserve some reservation for the possibility that some Einstein-like person comes along and shows that we're very wrong about something? It seems like a scientist would say, yeah, we should reserve that, some skepticism for that possibility. That's the whole point of what we're doing. Like, we're trying to run experiments in part because we would like to know if some of the things that we're assuming are wrong. We also kind of want to know if some of the stuff we're assuming is right. But occasionally we're interested in knowing if we're wrong. So scientists don't seem to be skeptics about everything. They're skeptics about something, and we'll have to, you can decide for yourself what they are exactly skeptics about. So the answer to the question, how can science yield knowledge if it's skeptical, is, well, simple. It's just not skeptical about everything. It's like skeptical about something less than everything. And that helps us explain certainty, right? So we rarely have certainty. So for example, we are not certain that we will or will not be in a car accident this year, that the stock market will do better or worse this year than it did last, that whatever hurricane is, currently out somewhere is not going to damage where we live, etc. Basically, anything that people take out insurance for is a thing that we are not certain about. Hence, insurance. Okay, so if we're uncertain about something, can we say that we know about it? So we're not certain that we will or we will not get in a car accident this year. Would it be inappropriate for me to say, I know whether I'm going to get in a car accident this year? Go ahead.
I think it would be appropriate if you decided not to ever get in a car. Like, you can say, like, with certainty that you won't because you've made a decision, or like there is uncertainty that you will never get in a car this year.
There's still the uncertainty that a car could hit you while you're just walking.
Sure. Okay. So and then Paula could say, yeah, but that's not a car accident. That's that's a car homicide. Well, hopefully not a homicide. It's a car. Something less than homicide. Yeah, okay, so fair. So you could add stipulations to it that would allow you to say So then, here's something we don't have control over, the stock market, right? Would it be inappropriate to say, I know whether the stock market will do better or worse this year than it did last year? Okay, I'll just give you a bit more information in case you didn't know this. The stock market has essentially improved every year, year over year, since its inauguration, with few exceptions. Okay, now, you're not certain that the stock market will be better or worse than it was last year, but do you know that it will be better than it was last year? No?
There's a possibility that it would be better, but you don't know for sure. So
Well, it sounds like it's not just possible that it'll be better, it sounds like it's probable.
probably.
Probable, but not certain. Those things that are probable, but we're not certain about, can we say that we know them? No. Anyone strongly disagree?
I think you can say you know it. You just still have that uncertainty there.
Oh, okay, so that's a big change. So now we're saying we can know,
Yeah.
but we do just need to acknowledge we're uncertain. Go ahead.
I don't think you can know unless you're certain.
Okay, so we're going to say a condition on knowledge is certainty up front. Back there, we lost that condition. Over here?
Well, can we say that we know about it? So it's like we don't know what the circumstance will be, but when I read the phrase know about it, I think like, oh, I know a lot about the stock market, I know a lot of details about it, so therefore I can predict, it's like different when you say I know about it.
Good, so it depends on what we're asking
Yeah.
that we know about, right? So if I ask you, do you know that in the past the stock market has, and if you know about the stock market, you're like, yeah, I know that. And then I say, okay, so on the basis of that, do you know what the stock market will do this year? And it sounds like up front, we're going to say no, but in the back, we might say yeah. So notice this kind of just hinges on what the heck we mean by no. And is there a right answer on what no means?
I don't think so.
Is there a right answer to that question? Go ahead.
Okay, so like in the course we've been, I mean, at least in the book they have said like knowledge for like sitting and thinking and boom, knowledge, meaning that like it's true and I'm thinking certain, like it's definitely, that's knowledge, so you're achieving knowledge for that. So I wouldn't use no without certainty, I would use another word.
So you're saying knowledge does require certainty.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's 2 in favor of certainty being a condition. Okay, so I just really want to quick introduce the last bit that'll have to do with next class's reading, because we're very low on time. Okay, so we might be asking now, look, is there anything we can be certain about? Because if we can't be certain about anything, and some of us think we only know things that we're certain about, would we thereby not know anything? Maybe you'd be more surprised by the idea that we don't know anything than by the idea that we're not certain of anything. If there is a difference in your level of surprise about those 2 statements, then you might think that there is a difference between certainty and knowledge, even if you can't articulate it clearly. And so here's the question you're going to try to answer in the reading. Suppose I argue that we know nothing. How should you respond? That is what the reading is going to tell you, and that is what we will discuss next class. Please turn in your in-class assignments before you go. You're free.